everybody, and welcome back to the Helen Winder Show. Today is the first of a Masterclass series with my lovely guest, Leisa Peterson, who is a wealth coach and the founder of the Wealth Clinic. This Masterclass is called The Art of Mindful Wealth, and we're going to have it in a 4-part series. So I'm going to hand over to Leisa, who will be able to take you through what it is we're going to cover and obviously our first session. So over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen, so much for having me as part of your show, and I am excited about this opportunity. So I think if I move to the next screen, there we go. There's the Art of Mindful Wealth, and I wanted to share some things that I've been putting together for many years, primarily because of the fact that I had worked in financial services for the past 24 years, and at the same time, past 16 years, I've been practicing meditation and mindfulness and teaching that to others as a hobby for many years until eventually deciding to start my own company, bringing mindfulness and meditation together with money, which was kind of a unique idea that I have to say I had a lot of struggles with the idea of giving myself permission to do this, because these two things are very different than each other. I'm sure you can understand that.
Absolutely.
So what I thought I would do is take everyone through kind of the background and the practice that I teach at a very high level, so that folks can understand that there is another way to deal with our relationship with money than just avoid it, is kind of the way I poke fun at it.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we fall into one of two camps with money. One, we're very diligent and we pay a lot of attention to the market and to managing money and to our checkbook and to our budget. Some people, it's almost like they come out of the womb focused on money.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I was one of those. And then there are other people who would do just about anything to not have to worry about money because it is a source of worry for them. And so they're good at avoiding it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I quite agree with you there. We do fall into, we don't fall into the same category for everybody, do we? We all are born with slightly different views on it.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some people in between where, they'll deal with it, but, less is better. So what I wanted to start with is, what is mindful wealth and why is it important?
Mm-hmm.
And how I define mindful wealth is the idea that wealth is coming from inside of us and it's radiating out into the world that we live in, rather than the idea of wealth that is all about the external world and how much, he who collects the most wins, that sort of idea that I think many of us have grown up in cultures that, champion that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm coming at it from a very, very different place. It doesn't mean that we don't have lots of resources, especially if that's something that's important to us. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
But I'm challenging this sort of cultural norm that more is better and that's the way to happiness. Instead, what I found is if we can start from within and get really, really clear on, who we are and how we want to show up in the world and what it is that we're passionate about and deeply enjoy doing,
Mm-hmm.
that the money comes from that experience of being in flow. That's another way of thinking about it, is if we can really understand and become more aware of ourselves, that leads us down a path that's very different than just having other people kind of tell us what we should want and what we should do.
Yeah.
So that's how I defined it. And why is it important? Probably goes without saying that my impression, having worked in the money business for so long, is that the strangest thing has happened with money that, I'll probably continue to research for the rest of my life because it's so interesting to me. But what I've found is because we've been raised to think that money is going to be this source of happiness and that it's important to have it from an external standpoint, not so much around the survival. Of course, we all know that we need to survive and we need to take care of our needs, but it goes to another level where it starts to define us and whether we're confident about ourselves, dependent on how much money we have, for example. Mm-hmm. But if we can break that way of thinking and touch into, a different way of thinking about money, what I found is we start to not allow money to diminish us. And so it's quite astounding how much money we've allowed money, or we've been taught to allow money to diminish our power as human beings.
Okay.
And that's why it's important. It's life-changing work, because if you can see that money is merely a tool to get the things that we want, and it isn't this other stuff this other whole way of being, that I think we've been taught, then I think doors open up for us. We start looking at possibilities rather than limitations in our life. Mm-hmm. So that's how I define mindful wealth.
Okay.
And another big part of it is touching into, this really soulful place that I think, my years and years and years of practicing meditation. I also practiced Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism for many years. I no longer practice that so much, but what I saw was we live in a culture that doesn't sufficiently reinforce the importance of compassion and developing a loving heart first and foremost. And even though it's a natural state of being, we are incredibly susceptible to the experiences outside of ourselves as we grow up. Mm-hmm. And if we don't grow up in a culture that surrounds us with love and compassion, we tend to lose sight of this deepest part of ourselves. And so, that's where the meditation comes into this whole equation, is reawakening these natural states of love, compassion, kindness, feeling, what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, and really deeply identifying with this commonality between all living beings. Mm-hmm. And that's a lifelong practice, perhaps because we're retraining ourselves.
Yes.
Compared to what we see in the news.
Yeah, it's sort of developing the habit that we actually really all have, but we learn how not to do it. So it's creating the old habit again of meditation and connection.
Definitely. I think it's helpful if even for a moment we imagine that we knew from birth on that we were masters of all of life, mm-hmm. and that we were powerful beyond measure and possessed tremendous gifts, and that all it took to deliver our gifts to the world was having the desire to do such. Imagine that you've arrived, with a heart filled with passion to shower love onto all those around you, and that you have an innate ability to create all that you need and want. So taking a deep breath, I know that this is our true state. Mm. And the more that we can touch into this state, the happier I think we become. At least I know that that's what's happened in my own life, is by touching into this understanding that just because I live in a world that shows me something quite different does not mean I have to drink that Kool-Aid. I know through meditation and touching into the deepest aspects of myself that the world that I see showing up is not a proper reflection of what's inside of me.
Yeah, Yeah, I know where you're coming from.
And so part of the reason, let's see what comes next, part of the reason that I started this work is, we're always drawn to the things that I would say are conflicted, inside of us. And so my earliest memories around money were struggles and difficulties with my parents, talking or not even talking, fighting about money. It was a source of deep stress, and they were not very good at managing money. They both had barely a high school education. They had difficulty when they were young, pretty extreme poverty. My mom even lived on the streets when she was a teenager. So I was always noticing this disconnect between, or the pain and the struggles that were being caused by money. At least that's how I interpreted it, which made me to be interested in thinking that if I understood money and I understood how to make it and save it and take care of it, be a better custodian of it than my parents were, then perhaps that would be able to bring the happiness that I was seeking in life that I definitely didn't feel when I was growing up. And, eventually I went and got my MBA in finance, and I started a career working in financial services. But the other thing that I didn't really totally understand, all my life I've had incredible empathetic ability to feel what other people feel, even if they're not feeling what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Which didn't really make sense to me, and I think I did a really good job of shutting it out. It may also be why I was drawn to the financial services industry, because nobody did that sort of thing. It wasn't a place that deeply intuitive people go to work.
Yeah.
And I was, I think, trying to drown it out, and what ended up happening is what you resist, persists in life. And so I found myself in this financial services industry where people were very different to each other when it had to, when we're helping each other with money. They would just change, and I would notice the change. I would notice the energetic shift of a person. I might be really good friends with someone, but the minute the conversation turns into how I might be helping them with investing or with their mortgage or other things, I would notice their whole entire presence would change. And I thought, well, where'd my friend go? What just happened to this person? I would also notice this thing that people would do, where they'd say, well, this is business. And every time I would hear that, it would, like, the hair on the back of my neck would stand up, because I knew that that wasn't the way that we were supposed to operate as human beings.
Yeah.
And business created a wall that allowed people to do things that were not touching into our deepest aspects. And it was very upsetting to me. And I'm kind of shocked, actually. I feel like I'm a little silly of a person, because it's shocking to me that I was able to stay in this industry as long as I did without, doing the work that I'm doing now. But I did. I survived, barely. And it caused me to start asking people questions and really understanding, why all this craziness, and that led me into, starting the Business Wealth Clinic. So what I thought we would do is, just for a moment, if we could do a brief meditation. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go. I've just shuffled, so I'm nice and comfortable.
Oh, good. So if we want to take some nice deep breaths and just settle into our body, just get really connected, relaxed, using the breath to help calm us and let go of any tension that we're holding in our bodies. Sometimes it's nice to imagine that you're surrendering into the chair beneath you. With the breath, we can just surrender again and again can also imagine that a light beam from the sun enters the top of the crown of our head and enters our body and fills us with warmth. And wherever that warmth and that sunlight touches inside of our body, it just has a way of burning up any kind of negativity that we're holding on to. And just feeling that warmth throughout our body. You can also imagine that there is a cord that extends from the base of our spine and goes down into the earth and connects, going deeper and deeper into the earth. It connects to the center of the earth. We feel that tightness of that cord, and we just feel this nice, deep connection with earth and all of the healing qualities that come from the earth enter back into our body and mix with this warmth of the sun. And we feel really grounded in this moment, really present in our body. This mixing of these two energies brings our attention towards our heart, a sense of being all, having access to all that we need. In this moment, we're experiencing a level of perfection. It's really about acceptance and allowance. Just feeling a sense of love, love for ourselves, love for others. Just being a state of love. And we can relax our concentration and open our eyes if we close them. So one of the things that I found that's helpful to note is through the research that I've been doing over the years around this inner relationship with money, it's very helpful to note that typically we lump everything together around money. And instead, I think it's very useful to note that there is a difference between money troubles versus money worries. And in the case of money troubles, that's a situation, right, where the dollars and cents are not adding up and we do not have enough money to take care of an obligation. We're feeling a lack of ability to solve a problem, but really there's only a few solutions to money troubles. Mm-hmm. That would be making more money, or going without. Pretty simple. So it's kind of a convergent problem, if you will.
Yeah.
On the other hand, money worries are, how I see them, is a very divergent problem. First of all, it comes from a psychological response to a challenge or perhaps a conditioned experience that we have had in the past where we became worrisome around anything to do with money. And now the money worry is actually taking on a completely different life, where money worries can come from money troubles, but oftentimes it's just a psychological response or an emotional trigger that causes us to go into a state of money worries. And one of the ways that I can explain that is in the United States, and I think it probably applies all over the Western world, but they've done study after study where they ask women questions about wealth and about money and about worry, and again, the data comes back that about 50% of women in North America are very worried that they are a few bad moves away from what we call bag lady syndrome. Even though, North America is one of, per capita, one of the, more wealthy countries in countries and continents in the world, there's this extreme fear around money and not having enough. Men don't have as high of numbers as women, and there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but it is still a prominent, for men it would be more around being able to provide to others, their family, than it is just about themselves. So that's interesting. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I know it is the same here, and you've got such a diverse sort of range of wealth, if you like, and you do, I mean, from what I've experienced and sort of witnessed, if you like, just looking around and listening to the news, there is an awful lot of sort of competition in a way that, well, we've got to have the money. I need that. I need this car. I need to have it the same as the Joneses down the road, or it's down to the other end where people really don't have the income to support just general living or what they think is their general living. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And all of this different pressure, seems to trigger those feelings of, I think, of worry that I won't, especially what comes up is this idea of keeping, like you were mentioning, keeping up with the Joneses, that if I'm not able to live a certain lifestyle, then my life is going to fall apart. Like, it's not balanced. It just thinks the extremes are going to happen.
Yeah.
Money worries, number one cause of divorce is money. Right up there at the top when it's pertaining to suicide, money challenges. So it gives us an idea of just how serious this problem is. And that's a good point or good time to note that it's shocking how little resources are available to human beings to deal with what we're talking about here. My research has shown me again and again that therapy, while it could help people, oftentimes therapists, at least back here in the States, therapists can have a lot of money baggage themselves, and you are not able to help others very well if you are struggling with that particular issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're uncomfortable. It triggers things in the therapist, and so very few therapists are comfortable going down this path around dealing with money worries. So there's one less resource, and then I think there are more and more people getting into the work that I do. I don't come from a therapy background. I come from this mindfulness background, but in all fairness, I don't feel like, I would say it's more of an intuitive place that I'm coming from through 16 years of my own inner discovery and figuring out what works for me, and then holding that space for people to uncover what are the things that are causing you to not achieve the objectives that you have for your own life, and what's also causing you to feel bad about where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the difference, isn't it? When we've traveled the road and come through the other side, we know what works. You can't support when you're in it yourself.
No, not really. I mean, I'll notice things that happen. Like, I was with a client the other day, and she was talking about her husband is in the same line of work as my husband. They're both building contractors. And she was talking about her fears around lawsuits and being sued. And immediately I could feel that was something that I hadn't totally worked myself through.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in that situation, I use tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique, I use that to help me stay present and not get in my story, but to stay in her story.
Yeah, yeah.
Calms the nervous system down quickly. But I thought I would touch upon a little bit around money and fear.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that is just amazing is, there's a lot of research in the UK about this sort of stuff, because there's a few things I'm going to cite, but that a 4-month course of psychological therapy was several times more effective on well-being than making more money.
Mm-hmm.
So, remember I was mentioning how people think that the happiness is going to come from making more money, but in reality, becoming more self-aware was powerful.
Yeah.
They also show, like I was saying before, that, number one cause of divorce, couples who argue about money early in their relationships were at greater risk for divorce. It's not the things that you think it's going to be. It's actually money, and it's for both men and women that's causing these arguments. Another that was interesting is in 2013, it was found that being preoccupied with money problems is equivalent to a loss of about 13 IQ points or losing a night's sleep.
Wow.
We know what that feels like. So you think if somebody, I think of employers, right? And this is why we would love to do more in the employer space, helping employees, because if you've got, thousands of employees and there's a strong likelihood that greater than 50% of them are worried about money at any given point in time, and they're losing, this loss of IQ and processing ability in their brain because of that.
Yeah.
That's a costly. Nobody's connected it to the dollars, but that's pretty big.
It is, because if you think about it, once they're sat and they're there to do their job, their daily work, you can't focus fully when you've got worries, because the worries always crop up at the wrong moment, and actually you spend more time on the worry than you do on the productivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The other big one that came to me was a 2013 study by Cambridge University that says that our money personality is set by the age of 7.
Wow.
So this behavior around worrying about money would very much be related to what's happening to you in that 0 to 7 experience. I think we also come into this life with a propensity to lean in one direction or another. If we're a worrier, I think it almost comes in with us, but
yeah.
We will definitely pay attention, like I was telling you about my situation where it was a source of worry. So, of course, I became a worrier about money and also decided early on that my life was going to be focused on getting out of that problem however I could. But I already mentioned the 50% of women, being fearful. Another was just the kind of percentage of people that worry about finances all the time. Just a lot of data around how fearful people are. I mean, is it like that in the UK as well?
It is. It certainly is. Yeah, and it's awful to watch. I mean, obviously, I've been there myself when through bankruptcy, the loss of our home, loss of business, and when you go through that, it is. There isn't an awful lot of assistance for you. You are pretty much on your own. And that's obviously when the worries set in, because we don't have the skills to work through them. You just go into the worry cycle or spiral.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people here in the UK that are in that cycle, and it's horrible to see, really awful to see. So hopefully by doing this, we'll be able to help some.
Yeah, it comes down to, first and foremost, to even realize that you're doing this, that you are worrying, and that giving it the attention that it's due, because I think people are really good at avoiding the topic. And that brings me to another thing that I feel is so core to being a human being. We are incredibly well suited to healing through the action of receiving comfort from another human being. Right, when we're a baby and we're crying, our mother or our father or our caregiver would pick us up and soothe us and hug us and tell us, that it was going to be okay. And we have been raised to begin the healing process through our communication and our interaction with other human beings.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't happen as it pertains to money. We don't soothe each other. We keep a lot of this bottled in, and we don't, since there aren't a lot of resources and you don't go to a party and start talking about losing your job and having no money because you know that people don't want to hear that. So there's this distancing and separation between ourselves and others that money really encourages because of the cultural norms that we've been taught. So
yeah, and also as an adult, to talk about them, you sort of feel a bit of a failure as well.
Yeah. And what's amazing, and I do a lot of group workshops, and the group workshops are just near and dear to my heart because without question, people come in and they're scared because they've never talked about money in a group and they don't feel like they, should. And so I'm trying to retrain them to understand that by engaging and actually talking about some of these fears, they will be blown away by their commonality that we each have, with each other, that opens up kind of our heart chakra, if you will. It like opens us up and it allows us to begin the healing process by just talking about it. Yeah, it helps people a lot, and I think that's a great reason to engage. There are things like I think Debtors Anonymous and other sources where they do bring people together and allow people to share that they're not alone.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just understanding and knowing that you're not alone in this. There are a lot of people who are in the same situation or feeling the same.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure if we had this slide so that I could share something that my daughter was in Africa this past summer, and she's the summer between her junior and senior year in high school. She's 17, and she went off, and she went and did fundraising to pay for this trip to go and work in orphanages for about 2.5 weeks.
Oh.
And she got the most incredible lesson through the experience. And what it was is she went to, these orphanages, and she met these children, and she met these wonderful adults that were, supporting and, involved in the orphanages, and found that these were some of the happiest people that she had ever met in her life. Like, she just couldn't believe how happy people were. And then she also, discovered that the average, and she was in Ghana, she said the average, Ghanaian lives on less than $5 a day. And she knows enough about money that is a big difference compared to what we live on in the United States. And she thought to herself, well, wait a minute, there's a disconnect because these are some of the happiest people I've ever met in my life, and yet they don't have very much in the way of material resources. And she came home and she said, Mom, I think that I am going to be okay no matter what college I get admitted to or no matter what job I end up doing in life. Like, these people showed me that the worry and the concern about your place in society and all this stuff is not true. It really isn't. It isn't if you don't make it. And of course there's cultural differences, but it was amazing for her to come back at 17 and say, gosh, it's not just about the money.
Yeah, what an experience. Wow.
Yeah, it was life-changing.
That little chap looks so happy.
Yes, he is holding some kind of flashlight of some sort, and he, these kids have nothing, and they were, given these toys and different things, and so he's showing that this little flashlight has just made his entire life. He wouldn't let
Oh,
go of it. He thought
oh,
this was
bless
very
him.
so that was what I wanted to share. So now I'm not sure that how many slides do we go? Is this the
I think this is
last
the
one?
last one.
Okay. So what we're going to be covering, over the next couple days in our talks is really about what can be done about these fears. What can we do? We now know it's a chronic problem. I think it's shared throughout the world. And what can we do to start to shift our consciousness around this worrying and let the worrying go so that we can step into this place that I think I talked about in the beginning, which is this true power as a human being and what we're really here to accomplish.
Wonderful. You know what? I'm really looking forward to it because I know instinctively that this is going to be quite powerful for many of the listeners out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that, people take away lots of different stuff, and can put it into practice right away. So
Yeah.
it's a great discussion. I'm loving the opportunity to talk with you about it.
Wonderful. Well, listen, what we will be doing is next time we'll be coming back and talking about how can you get mindful wealth. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one. I'm looking forward to that.
Yay, thank you.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Leisa. And if you pop to the next slide, it's got your contact details on there for our listeners out there. And obviously, do drop any questions that you might have across to Leisa or follow her on her website and obviously Twitter as well. It's all there in front of you on the screen. I'll also pop it all on the website as well, so you can catch up with this and all the following master classes that we have on this very powerful subject. So the art of mindful wealth. Thank you so much, Leisa. We'll speak very soon.
Thank you.